Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar looking at the draft reviewed identification of engineering work rules. My name is Kosi Nkambule, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Officer at ECSA. And with me today, I have my colleagues. It is a pleasure to have you all with us today as we delve into this important topic. So a bit on the session. The session is structured as an information sharing platform to provide clarity on the reviewed IDoEW rules. And our aim today is to foster meaningful interactions. While attending, microphones are currently muted to ensure a smooth flow. We hope that this session will encourage active participation through the chat session. We'll also have a Q&A session, which will follow the presentation, where you will have the opportunity to share your comments or questions. Microphones for the sessions will be enabled for those individuals at that stage. I'd like to acknowledge and thank everyone who took the time to review the document and submit their comments by the 19th of Jan. Your contributions have been invaluable to today's discussion. We look forward to a productive and insightful session. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, and good morning, colleagues. My name is Suresh Ramsarup. I'll be doing the presentation this morning on behalf of the Engineering Council. I'm currently the chairperson of the Identification of Engineering Work task team. The task team is made up of a range of colleagues from the various industries and the various categories of registration. And the primary purpose of the task team is to support the Engineering Council with stakeholder engagement around the identification of engineering work. And this morning's session is one such consultation. I see that there is an agenda being displayed at the moment. I'm just trying to read. We have a welcoming message from Mr. Khumalo. Mr. Khumalo, over to you.
Good morning, colleagues. I haven't seen Mr. Nimalo on the attendance. Maybe I can just request to just verify with him for a minute, and then we'll get back to you. Thank you.
Okay, I see that we also have on the program Mr. Shlalukana, who will outline the MS Teams protocols. Mbalelo, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Good morning to you all, colleagues. I think Ukosi had already just given us a brief, but maybe for the sake of those that were maybe not with us during that period, colleagues would love this to be an interactive session as possible. So we would kindly request that our mics remain closed during the presentation, and they will be followed by a session wherein we will allow people to raise their hands and then note them before they can then pose questions or make any comments. We are also going to allow, some comments via the chat, which we'll be monitoring from time to time, and we will bring this to the attention of the program director. I think that is the long and short of it, Prof. Thank you so much, and hoping for a very fruitful session for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Mshali, are we still waiting for Mr. Khumalo to join us? Or should we just go
I'm
ahead?
struggling to get hold of him, Prof. So I don't know whether he's, I don't know.
Okay, so maybe we just go ahead.
I think I will go ahead, and then I will simply stand in for him Mr. Ngumalo, if you are in the meeting, because I'm struggling to see your name here, there are so many names, you can go ahead. But then if you are not, I don't know. Let me just welcome the participants. Good morning, colleagues. You are welcome to this webinar. I know the program director has welcomed you, but on behalf of ECSA, we are really pleased to have you here because to us, the identification of engineering work is an activity that is very close to our heart. Because of its impact on the engineering sector. In the presentation, we'll just take you through what we have done thus far, and then this marks an end of the process of reviewing the identification of engineering work rules. And so we had shared with you the comment sheet together with the document where we request your inputs so that when we re-gazette this, because we gazetted these in 2021, then we are able to factor in your comments. And if you do send your comments, then we will consider them, and then we'll provide feedback afterwards to see how those were considered, where we'll be giving you even the response from the working group that is assisting us in this important work that we are doing. I know then that Prof indicated that we do have task team that is assisting us on this. That task team is composed of different professionals from different registration categories. At this point, we have 5 registration categories, and they are all represented. That is your professional engineers, represented by 2 professionals, the engineering technologies, represented by 2 professionals, technicians, the same, specified category practitioners, the same, certificated engineers, the same. So it's a well-rounded task team that looks into each aspect that concerns each registration category. And we really do encourage you to participate and then send us the comments of areas that maybe you think we need to improve on, because this broader consultation in its nature is just for soliciting inputs from yourselves as the professionals that will be affected by the Gazette. So thank you very much for attending. We are looking forward to an engagement, fruitful engagement with yourselves, and we are looking forward to getting inputs from you that will aid in improving the current draft of the document. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mshali. Can I then share my presentation again?
Yes, Prof. Over to you, Program Director. Yes, Prof. Thank you.
I don't see it on my side. Can anyone see it on their side? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Mshali, for that welcome. Colleagues, as has been indicated already, that I am supported by the personnel from various divisions within ECSA, the members of the task team. There will also be other members from registration committees that may also be present. And they are supporting me in the sense that when questions are being asked, I may not be able to provide all the answers, and we would, as a team, provide clarity on some of the issues raised. We may not be able to address all the issues that are raised, because there are some issues that may require further investigation, and that will go back to the task team for further review, and then feedback would be provided. Just to give an indication, as already been highlighted, the legislation came into effect in March 2021. And there has been extensive stakeholder consultation to bring about awareness around the legislation. This particular legislation is a living document in that it requires periodic review, and we currently reviewing the identification of engineering work. taking into account all the concerns and challenges that have been submitted to ECSA, and hopefully within the legislative framework that governs this identification of engineering work, we will be able to address the various concerns and challenges that have been highlighted. Today also gives us a further opportunity to raise particular issues around the identification of engineering work and the implementation thereof. Today's presentation, I'm hoping that we would cover very briefly following sections in this presentation. I'll provide a bit of a background and largely around the mandate of ECSA. Just to say that it's not the intention of this presentation to get into the details of the legislation, but rather to just provide a quick overview of some key elements, and more so to hear from the stakeholders the various challenges and concerns and points for clarity that may be required, and also to indicate the way forward. Just a bit of a background. I'm assuming that all the attendees would have had a look at the documentation, the actual legislation that has over 50 pages and are fully aware of the content. So I'm just going to touch on some key elements of that document. Just a bit of a background. The Engineering Council is a statutory body established under the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure in terms of the Engineering Professions Act of 2000. So ECSA has been in existence since 1920, but the legislation of the Engineers Professionals Act of 2000 is what governs the current mandate of ECSA. Just to say that ECSA is one of 6 councils that falls under the Council of the Built Environment, which is the statutory body established in terms of the Council for the Built Environment Act. And the Council for the Built Environment is an entity that reports to the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. So the Council for the Built Environment is an overarching body regulating the activities of the 6 councils that fall under the CBE. And through the 6 councils, the Council for the Built Environment has the statutory mandate to accredit learning programs at educational institutions, register applicants in appropriate categories of registration, and exercise oversight over the professional conduct of registered persons. So you know, that's the overarching body that's looking at the built environment professions, and the Engineering Council specifically being one of the councils under the Council for the Built Environment will then look specifically at the engineering profession. This gives you an indicator of what the mandate of the Engineering Council is. I'm going to go through it very quickly. It's not my intent to read every detail. The key elements is first to develop standards for engineering education, and also to develop the standards for professional competency. It's required to conduct accreditation visits to the education institutions that are providing engineering education. It's also required to maintain a register of registered professionals and register people in the appropriate registration categories. It is mandated to develop a code of conduct and the codes of practice for the various disciplines and the various categories of practitioners. It's required to establish the specified categories of registration. During the presentation, some of these things will be expanded on. Like I said, its mandate is to oversee the conduct of the profession, and therefore ECSA has the mandate to investigate complaints and improper conduct. Recognizing voluntary associations, and voluntary associations that we are referring to are discipline-specific associations. Such examples would be the South African Institute of Civil Engineers or South African Institution of Chemical Engineers, and so forth. And these voluntary associations provide a valuable service to ECSA and is a key stakeholder to ECSA's activities. It's also required to engage in international agreements. As people may be aware, there are a number of accords and mobility forums to which ECSA is a signatory. And through these various forums and mobility forums and accords, it implies that qualifications from South Africa are recognized by signatory countries, and likewise categories of registration through the various mobility forums are recognized by signatory countries. So that creates a fair amount of international mobility because ECSA is a signatory to some of these accords and mobility forums. Key to this, of course, is recommending to the Council of Built Environment the identification of the type of work performed by engineering practitioners, and this has what resulted in the identification of engineering work. Also to determine conditions relating to continuing education, training, and professional development. Annually publish the guidelines for professional fees and scope of work, and of course to provide advice to the various ministries that relates on matters that relate to the engineering profession. So that briefly outlines what the mandate of ECSA is. You would find that in each of those blocks we make specific reference to the various sections within the Engineers Professions Act that will then indicate or highlight or confirm what the mandate that's given to ECSA in terms of the Engineers Professions Act. The identification of engineering work, just to give an indication of how it came about, the process that was followed. There is a legislative requirement on this particular process. So to very quickly go through it, like I indicated, that there are 6 councils that report to the Council for the Built Environment, and the councils must consult all voluntary associations, any person, any body, or any industry that may be affected by any laws regulating the built environment professions regarding the identification of the type of work which may be performed by persons registered in any of the categories referred in the various sections of the various legislation. So that would have happened. The Engineering Council would have undertaken that particular process. After the process of consultation, the various councils must submit recommendations to the Council of the Built Environment. regarding the work identified in terms of the various subsections of the legislation. The CBE, which is the Council for the Built Environment, after receiving the various submissions from the 6 councils, will ensure that, firstly, that there is alignment with the policies and legislative requirements of the CBE, and will further consult with persons, body, or industry that may be affected by the identification of work. And then this is then submitted to the Competition Commission. And during the consultation, colleagues, there would have been a number of concerns raised and submitted to the Competition Commission. And on all the issues that have been raised, the councils would need to address the various issues that have been raised by affected parties, and to ensure that the identification of any work isn't anti-competitive, because that's the role of the Competition Commission. And once it has gone through the process and ticked all the boxes, it then serves before the relevant ministry for this to be then legislated through Parliament. Colleagues, just to indicate that when we look at the identification of engineering work, that whole process took more than 10 years to where we are today. So it has been a long process of consultation and to and froing with the Competition Commission to ensure that the proposed identification of engineering work is not seen as anti-competitive and is there to protect specifically the engineering profession. So when we talk about the identification of engineering work, we indicated that in terms of the Engineers Professionals Act, Section 26 empowers ECSA to develop the policy. And as I indicated, that the development of the identification of engineering work was a long process. It took almost 10 years in its development. And then after having satisfied the Competition Commission, this legislation was then gazetted on the 26th of March 2021. And what does it do? It determines in a very concise way the designated work that the different registration categories can carry out. It defines and demarcates the work between the engineering registration categories. It also defines the type of work within the various engineering disciplines. As you may be aware that within engineering we have 11 recognized disciplines. And within those recognized disciplines, we may have even further sub-disciplines or specializations, as we would allude to as we go through the presentation. And what is the objective of the identification of the work, engineering work? Well, the underpinning foundation is the safety and protection of the public and the environment by ensuring that only registered professionals in the different categories of registration who have demonstrated the required competence and academic qualifications perform engineering work or take responsibility for engineering work so performed per category. And that's the underlying objective. I'm hoping that everyone in the audience are engineers, and the objective is actually to protect your profession. We've heard of cases, we may have read of cases where people are doing engineering work without even having an engineering qualification or engineering background. And this legislation is meant to protect the profession.
Apologies, Prof. Could
Yes.
we kindly ask that you please unshare and then reshare the presentation? A few of our colleagues on the line are saying they are not able to see the presentation, so I'm not sure what the issue could be.
Okay, I would do that just now. Just give me a minute. Let me do
Thank
that.
you.
Stop sharing. Okay, and then we reshare. I just need confirmation. Are we still having the same challenge?
The presentation is up on my end, so I think we can carry on and we'll see
yes.
via chat if people still are unable.
I can see from the thumbs up that it's possibly now visible. Yes. So we were then talking about, I see there's still messages coming through, unable to see. So I have shut down my presentation and reshared. So I'm not too sure. Cannot see, still cannot see. Okay, there's a number of, anyone has any particular suggestions on how we could possibly overcome this challenge? We are engineers, so we should be able to find solutions. Colleagues, are we still having that challenge?
Maybe.
Prof,
so,
I
yes.
think ordinarily when there is this challenge, maybe the person who's struggling to see the presentation needs to log out and then come back again. Because now most people can see maybe the problem or the connection is weak on their side. So I would
Yes.
recommend that they log out and then come back again. Maybe things would have improved by then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the suggestion. Those colleagues that are having a challenge, maybe if you could log out and then log in again, and hopefully that would solve that. Thank you. Or someone's indicated that they've logged out and logged in and still can't see, and I can see a lot of messages indicating they can now see. Okay, so did not work. We'll try again. I can see from my end. So colleagues, please, what we would do is share the presentation. There's lots of suggestions coming through on the chat. So colleagues, if you could try one of those suggestions. Can I get an indication of whether I can proceed? We may not be able to accommodate everyone.
Yes, please.
Thank
Prof.
you. Thank you. So when we talk about identification of engineering work, what are we doing? Okay, so what are we doing? We're defining the engineering activities that can be performed by a registered person in the various categories. We are also defining the key or the core competencies within the 11 competency areas that a registered person must possess. So this is what's all in that legislation. We identify all these things. We identifying the core services that can be performed by a registered person in any of the category of registrations in a particular discipline. We also identify the practice areas of a particular engineering discipline within which a registered person performs engineering work. We alluded earlier that once we have 11 recognized disciplines, some of the disciplines also have sub-disciplines and more specialities. A typical example of that would be civil engineering, for example, where they would have specialities in structural engineering, geotech engineering work, hydraulic work, working in municipality type of work, transportation. So there would be, within some disciplines, there will be areas of specialization as well. So the legislation that you have, or the documentation that you have, identifies these various elements. What it also does, it also identifies other areas that are not captured within the first four, which include scope of services for specific engineering work. And you will see what it is that we are saying by this particular point when we discuss the engineers that work in higher education, in teaching and assessments, and people that are working within the organ of state that's responsible for certain activities which we have identified within the legislation. So what's the implications of the identification of engineering work? And it says the following: a person who performs any identified engineering work in a particular engineering discipline must, in addition to any other requirement contemplated in the Engineering Professions Act, must be suitably qualified, must be registered with ECSA in the appropriate category applicable to the service performed, and must possess the necessary core competence in the practice areas to perform such core services as a professional engineer or a professional engineering technologist, a professional certificated engineer, a professional technician, or a specified category practitioner. I think when Ms. Mshali was doing the introduction, she indicated that there were 5 categories of registration, and currently those are the 5 categories of registration. When we refer to the pillars, we actually identifying what's the overall benefits of registration, or how does the industry, the profession, the country as a whole benefit from this registration process, or the requirement to register with the Engineering Council. So firstly, it provides evidence that you're competent to do engineering work. It also indicates that you abide by a particular code of conduct that's specified by the professional body, that you maintain a high standard of professionalism, and you are providing a quality of engineering service. It also means that because of the various accords and mobility forums that have been signed by the Engineering Council, that your engineering education is recognized globally and nationally. The professional competence is also recognized globally and nationally, and this is because of the various accords that ECSA is a signatory to. It provides confidence to your clients and your customers. It allows for global mobility. Many of our companies are multinationals, so it does allow for global mobility, or promote global mobility. And it's in compliance with the professionalization of the public sector framework. And I will talk to that, I think, in the next slide. When we talk about professional practice, part of the registration process is that your registration is valid for 5 years. And in order for you to be re-registered, is a simple process. You just need to provide adequate proof that there has been development and training on your part in order to retain your professional registration. This is to ensure that the registered professionals are keeping abreast with industry expertise and cutting-edge services, and also being exposed to the latest developments within the engineering profession. So yes, you can register, but during your registration period, you are expected to engage in continuous professional development in order for you to retain your professional registration. And of course, colleagues, the key is safety of the public and the environment, also providing quality service. We want to prevent malpractice and improper conduct, and the registered person, of course, can be held accountable for the engineering solutions provided. I made mention of the professionalization of the public sector. In October 2022, government released the professionalization of the public service framework. And this is to address the many challenges that government has had in the past 2 decades when it relates to service delivery and so forth. And it came to the realization that there needs to be a set of guidelines in order to professionalize the public service. And in particular, when it talks about professionalization, it said it wants to subject all employees to a single dispensation of professional registration and regulation. It wants to give recognition of the various professional categories within the sector and subject them to registration with external regulated external professional bodies. Okay, so that's within government, and every ministry, every level of government, whether it's at the national level, the provincial level, at the metro level, even local government level, is meant to comply with this framework, with the intent of professionalizing the public sector. I referred to the third component when we were looking at the definitions, when we said we want to identify other specified work. And here we have 2 additional categories that have been identified. The first is work by persons who oversees the planning, design, and delivery of education and training programs. And here specifically it says that any person who oversees the planning, design, and delivery of education and training programs accredited by ECSA and involved in the assessment of students at the engineering exit level at a higher education institution that has been established in terms of the Higher Education Act is deemed to be a person who performs identified work. Okay, so what it's saying is that all the lecturers at higher education institutions that are involved in engineering education are required to be registered. That's the implications of that subsection of the identification of engineering work. In addition to that, it says that work by persons or work by an employee of an organ of state. I just want to get any person who is employed by an organ of state and whose conditions of service requires that person to manage the delivery and maintenance of engineering work is deemed to be a person who performs identified work as contemplated in item 2 of the notice. So item 2 is referring to various sections of the legislation, and what it's saying is that employers of the state who are involved in the delivery, planning and delivery and maintenance of engineering work requires to be registered. Just in terms of the work identified by persons of the different categories, as I have alluded that there are 11 competency areas, and in the identification of engineering work, you would have seen that the 11 have been identified. And in the 11 competency areas, you would find that typical indicators have also been included to further help define what is expected in a particular competency areas. And the differentiation between the various categories is based on two key differentiations. That is the types of problems that the registered professional would be engaged in. And there is a differentiation, and I'm not going to get into the detail of it, but just to give you an example, we talk about complex problems, we talk about broadly defined problems, we talk about well-defined problems, and we talk about specifically designed problems. And then, of course, the second differentiation between the various categories of registration is the complexity of the engineering activity. And once again, the definition is based on complex engineering activity, broadly defined, well-defined, and so forth and so forth. And that's what brings about the differentiation between the various categories. What we specifically talking to here actually leads on to the next slide when we look at when we want to deviate and operate outside our areas of registration. This says that a person who's registered as a professional engineer is deemed to be registered as a professional technologist or professional technician and may perform identified work of a technologist or a technician. Likewise, it says that a person that's registered as an engineering technologist is deemed to be registered as a professional engineering technician and may perform identified work of a professional engineering technician. So that's what the legislation is saying. What it's trying to make a distinction is it's the reverse is not true. A professional engineering technician can't start doing engineer's work unless there has been an application made to ECSA for that particular person to engage on a specific project at that particular level. But we will cover those aspects as we come to it. Here, registered person. So we're saying that a person registered in a particular category, notwithstanding the provisions of items 6 to 15, which is referring to specific sections of the legislation, perform any work identified in terms of item 6 to 15 for a different category of registered person if ECSA grants such registered person a transitional authorization, special consent, or category adjustment, as the case may be. So we're saying that, yes, these things can happen because of the nature of certain types of projects and because a particular person may have developed a certain level of expertise in a particular area and is required to work at a level of a different category, then all that needs to happen is for that person to then to apply to ECSA for this transitional authorization or special consent. And these would then be limited to a particular project or a particular duration, or if the candidate is always working at a different category of registration, he may then apply for a category adjustment. And all these applications would go through a review process within ECSA, and the person may then receive the authorization to do that type of work. The next clause is specifically to the certificated engineer. And we know that the certificated engineers largely are governed by legislation from the Department of Labor and the OSH Act. To comply with that, we need to have certificated engineers on site. That requires a special combination of qualifications to be issued to that particular person to work as a certificated engineer. Just in terms of what has happened since the 21st of March 2021, there has been several stakeholder engagements. And here we're just listing them in the various categories. Voluntary associations have been consulted. Companies that have undertaken commitment and undertaking organizations. So there are companies where the training has been recognized, and there's a MOU between ECSA and those companies. The public higher education institutions that are offering engineering programs. So these are all the organizations that have been consulted, and consultation is ongoing. Government entities that are performing engineering work, like the Department of Water and Sanitation, Department of Transport, Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. Those would be sort of some typical examples when we're looking at government entities. Here we're looking at the various SOEs, for example, SAA, that's involved in aeronautical engineering, ESCOM, electrical engineering, chemical engineers, and so forth. So these would be your typical government entities. Government departments, which I alluded to earlier, that's performing engineering work. And I gave some examples, which is, for example, the Department of Water and Sanitation, Department of Transport, Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, and so forth. Private companies, there has been engagements with private companies. There has been a broad-based engagement with industries, TVET colleges and private institutions, and there's been a substantial engagement with municipalities because of the professionalization framework of the public sector. This would have a major impact on government entities, government departments that are performing engineering work, and the municipality. So there's been quite extensive engagements with the large metros and the smaller municipalities. There's been a fair amount of consultation via various structures as well, via SALGA, MISA. These are just some of the organizations that are assisting municipalities to ensure compliance. This is just an indication of, in fact, it doesn't quite have the numbers, but it just gives an indication of what has been achieved. I think thus far, since 2021, there may have been over 60, 70 consultations, either with a particular municipality, a grouping of voluntary associations, higher education as a whole, or even maybe a specific university would have invited ECSA to do a presentation. So there's been a fair amount of consultation and education around the identification of engineering work and the implications of its implementation. Okay, once again, we're just giving an indication of the scope of work that has been done or has been done thus far. We've addressed 36 municipalities. There were 36 other organizations. And we still have a projected plan of engaging with 23 other such organizations. So what are some of the issues that have been picked up? This is not an exhaustive list, but just typically some of the things that people have raised. There was issues of dual registration. Do we need to be registered in different councils? And here we're looking specifically within the 6 councils that report to the Council of the Built Environment. There's also a realization during the consultation process that there are other professional bodies that engineers may have to comply with in order to perform in a particular sector. And a typical example of that would be in the aviation industry. The Civil Aviation Authority has a particular logbook that allows people to work on certain types of aircraft based on the hours that they've spent on working on particular types of engines and so forth and so forth. And that would then regulate on what types of aircraft or types of engine that particular person can work on. So whilst the person may be registered as an engineer, in addition to that, you have other statutory bodies that would have additional requirements. So there has been a fair amount of discussions going on with other statutory bodies where there may be an overlap in terms of the regulation. Do we expect them to be registered in 2 different councils, or would one council then suffice? And that's an ongoing discussion that needs to be resolved. So just in terms of working with other councils, for example, when we look at the identification of work of the architectural profession, they have a clause that said work shall include aspects that are common to more than one council or discipline where recognized requisite skills and competence permit the professional within one council to undertake work identified within the scope of works of another council without the need for dual registration. So as ECSA, we recognize that there will be areas that overlap with other disciplines. It won't be engineering work. It may be other type of work. And one has to then take note of that. And in terms of our response to that was we said, well, a person who's registered as a professional under the Professions Act, other than the engineering profession, may apply for registration with ECSA, provided that such person can show proficiency to perform the identified engineering work applicable to the respective category of registration. The work shall include aspects that are common to more than one council, where recognized requisite skills and competence permit the professional within one council to undertake work identified within the scope of works of another council. A person who wishes to apply can follow the special consent and transitional authorization process as outlined by ECSA. So here it's saying, well, if such a person wants to be undertaking some aspects of engineering work that has been identified within his profession as well, feels that he needs to be registered with ECSA, that registration will be a transitional authorization process or special consent, which means it may be for the duration of that project, because we can't give an undefined period for which this person can be performing some aspects of engineering work. So what is the way forward? We're expecting employees to identify their engineering skills and training needs of their engineering employees. Employees are required to start on the road to registration immediately. Employees to develop plans to upskill the engineering staff to meet the registration requirements. And then, of course, ECSA will issue a letter on the enforcement of identification of engineering work and compliance plans. So once we receive the plans from the various industries on how they plan to comply, ECSA would then monitor the implementation as per the plan that has been submitted by a particular company or particular industry, and so forth. The way forward, we spoke about the submission of a compliance plan template. There is a template that companies are required to submit to ECSA. These compliance plans due date is the 31st of March, 2025. And like I said, the purpose of the compliance plans is then ECSA can monitor your compliance as per your plan. And that is the intent. I saw that there were some chats. If I could just go to the chat quickly, I saw that. Okay, there's kindly provide reference amongst engineering policy documents that addresses the issue of overlapping activities from other built environments, if available. Okay, that's noted. I'm just looking at some of them. Yes, some examples. We know that there's a fair amount of overlap with the South African South African Council for Project and Construction Management Professions, with the architects and so forth. We will come to the session. I just want to. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the presentation. We can then open the floor for points of clarity and so forth. I'm just going to ask my ECSA personnel to assist with this process. How do we want to do this process? We'll take three questions at a time.
Yes, we will, Prof. So everyone who's raised their hand will take the first three and go like that until we can go through as many questions as possible.
Okay.
The first hand that I saw come up was Clement, and I'm just going to unmute you now, and you can go. Clement?
Clement, you can unmute and raise your question.
Okay, I'll move to Paul, allowing Mike. You can go, Paul.
Everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Right, Prof, you mentioned there's a slide there where it talks about engineering sector, where you talked about a registered engineer must meet the suitable qualification, register with ECSA, and then possess core competencies, right?
Yes.
In a particular sector. And then you went further to another slide where you're talking about identification of work by personnel registered in different category, where it says if ECSA grants such registered person a transitional authority or special consent or category adjustment, as the case may be. Now, the question that I have is, we have sent concerns to ECSA where we have found in our sector where people registered in other sectors are signing off work that maybe they might have the what you call it, the experience, we don't know, but the relevant qualification is not there. Because I'll give you an example. Somebody might be registered as an electrical engineer, but then signs off a roof structure.
Yeah.
And I think what you have just said here is quite clear. But what I think the challenge that we have is, what is ECSA doing about scenarios when these kind of things happen in the sector? Because it seems as if it is actually the implementation of, I think, this document that you have just shared with. I think the necessary framework is there, but it's the implementation of thereof that I think we have a problem with. Yeah. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. Thank you. The question you raised and the example that you've given of an electrical engineer signing off on roof trusses, which is outside his area of competence. The receiving, whether it was the municipality of receiving those plans, should have verified whether the engineer is a structural engineer to have signed off on it. And part of this identification of engineering work is to protect the profession. Now, you're given an example where someone is working outside, and this goes against the code of practice. If it's a registered professional, and he's working outside his area of competence, then it goes against the code of conduct within engineering. And if the details of that particular person is then submitted to ECSA, ECSA would then do an investigation in that regard. And you're quite right. If one looks at, for example, the Department of Labor and the way it implements, the equity targets, the industry itself or the company itself will set its targets, and the Department of Labor will monitor against those targets. So similarly, we initially would see that's how, before we get to full compliance, that's how the transitional period will unfold before us, where using the company plans, we will then hold companies against that. But talking specifically of your concern, I think if it was that registered person that signed work outside his area of competence, then that calls for a disciplinary investigation. Yeah. Thanks. I'm not too sure whether I've addressed the concern. I think we all realize.
Yes, I think you have. We already have about, I think, 3 cases or something that are sitting with ECSA for the past maybe 2 years.
Yeah.
And nothing has been done, unfortunately. But yeah, you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next one is Vuyo.
Vuyo, you can go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. I've got a big problem. I've been trying since 2022 to register with ECSA. My problem is I last worked as a technician more than 20 years ago. I've been teaching students since 1999. Now I want to register, and there are 3 categories. So I wanted to register as a technician. But when I complete the form, it asked questions like, which problems had you identified? How did you go about solving them? But I teach and assess students. I give problems to them. They solve them, and I assess them as a lecturer. Now I can't complete the form. That's my problem. I can't, because I'm not the one to solve the problem. Students are doing, and the Gazette says, if I teach, assess students, I'm Sorry, I'm doing engineering work. Can somebody show me the correct form for an academic? Because that one is for a technician, and I'm not doing technician work. I assess and teach, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vuyo. Yes, that has been a significant challenge within the education sector. So ECSA has come up with a set of guidelines. There was a task team that looked at a set of guidelines that will be applicable to people within the academic sector. And the guidelines will give an indication of typical evidence that can be provided in the various areas of competencies that you actually do when you are teaching engineering. So I would suggest that, Vuyo, that you need to get hold of that set of guidelines. I know that it has been distributed to all the universities via the deans. So I'm not too sure at which institution that you may be in.
Can I add something? Sorry to interrupt. I work for Walter Sisulu University in East London. Walter Sisulu University in East London. Thank you.
So the dean of Walter Sisulu would have received the guidelines during the dean's forum. And those guidelines are there to assist academics with the registration process. So maybe you could just check with the dean or the office of the dean. Maybe he designated that to someone within his office to assist the staff with registration. The next
hand is Ishak.
Please go ahead.
Okay, we can move on to Dave Wright, Prof.
Dave, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi,
Good
Dave.
morning. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you to ECSA and to Prof. Ramsarup for making the presentation today. It's very helpful. You have already explained in your presentation what the terms transactional authorization, special consent, and category adjustment mean, but the document that has been produced doesn't have them in the definitions. Is that going to change? So that's my first question. The second question is, where can one find the compliance plan template on the ECSA website without having a guide doc? Thank you.
Thank you. Someone from on the ECSA side would like to answer. So Dave, I think when the revision was done, one of the things that we did was to remove some of the definitions and explanations that already exist in other policy documents. For example, you would see that if you have got a copy of the revision, which is still being revised, that the definitions regarding complex problems and so forth, reference is made to another policy document where that definition can then be read in the full context. One of the challenges we had was when we extracted bits and pieces of information from existing policy documents of ECSA and included it into the identification of engineering work, sometimes it's read out of context. So the idea was, well, to streamline it, let's make reference to the relevant policy documents within ECSA that then puts that whole definition within context. But your items that you raised around those definitions for transitional authorization, special consent, and category adjustment, I think will be noted by the ECSA personnel and then would be taken into consideration during the review process. Thank you. I think Ms. Mshali wants to give some feedback. Ms. Mshali, please go ahead.
Thank you, Prof. On my side, you've already answered the definition aspect of it. So I'll simply zoom into the compliance template. We do have it on our website, and those who are attending this meeting will also share it together with the presentation so that everybody will have access to it. It's a very simple form that we are going to use just to monitor the compliance. And it is important for all those who are completing the form to make sure that the information they provide is as realistic as possible, so that when we monitor them according to what they have put in there, which is doable. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the response. Can I just say that in terms of the definition of those various terms, if they are defined somewhere else, then I think it's perfectly adequate to refer us to the document that they are defined in fully.
Yes.
Not necessarily have to repeat the whole definition, but we have to know where to go to understand what those terms mean. That's the critical issue. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, your points are noted, Dave. Thank you.
Okay. We can move on to the next hand, Prof.
Yes,
okay,
please go ahead.
It's Erasmus Wilhelmin. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I would please like to know how will be differentiated between complex engineering work and broadly defined engineering work? Because currently in the industry, we have PR and PR techs that are doing exactly the same work based on experience. And who is going to tell us now exactly that this type of work, these type of activities cannot be performed by a PR tech anymore?
Okay, so I think there is a recognition that there will be an overlap of work. I wish I had that graph that typically shows the overlap between someone with a technology education background and someone with a traditional engineering background. And there is a significant overlap. And the more you head towards the engineers specialize in analysis, design, and so forth. And with years of expertise, yes, you could progress in that particular area. And if you feel that even though you're registered as a professional technologist and you are really doing work of an engineer, then you can apply for a category adjustment. And your reports, which reflect, your experience and your description in the various competency areas, will be evaluated to ascertain whether you are performing as an engineer. One of the challenges that we have is that typically we find that lots of engineers are mostly doing technology work. So sometimes to say, well, the engineers and technologists are doing the same work, it could be a situation where you have, want of a better word, when we say a highly qualified engineer doing technology work. We took a sledgehammer to hit a nail, so to speak. And that's typically, sometimes you find that in industry. And as we've indicated that, well, an engineer, a professional engineer, a registered engineer can do technology work. And if in your experience that's been largely happening, it doesn't mean that you are doing engineering work. But like I said, if you feel that you are, and you're meeting the indicators as indicated in that table 1, where we present the different categories of registration and the typical indicators that may be associated with it, then you apply for a category adjustment. In terms of the legislation, that is allowed, and ECSA will evaluate your application.
Okay, thank you. But that brings me to my next question. Who at ECSA is going to evaluate all the applications? since I know people that have tried just to register for PR Inch or PR Inch Tech just to get their registration in August, the cycles are already overlapping. They've not received any feedback yet. That was due by the end of last year. So just from a practical point of view, if each PR Inch Tech now needs to apply for a concession or approval, and it needs to be done per project, I'm just concerned about the implications in actually having that person ready to do the work if they are still waiting for the approvals.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me, Ms. Mshani, you can go ahead if you got a response to that. Thanks.
I will start with the previous question that Alice posed in terms of the overlaps and in terms of the differences between complex engineering problems as well as broadly defined engineering problems. So we do have policies that sort of even give you the characteristics of those, which is your RO2 STA. RO2 STA PEPT PN. So if you look at that document, it will sort of categorize it nicely for yourselves. And then again, you are touching on an important question that Prof has already touched on of the transitional authorization and the and the backlog that you have observed in terms of the registration windows that we established this year. Maybe on that one, I will just say we request that you be patient. You know, when you are introducing something new, and there is also this legislation that we are currently discussing, there have been an influx of applications. And we are also working on improving our system and trying to digitize most of our processes. So with those two working, with those two going concurrently, we are experiencing a bit of delays in terms of processing the applications. But then now that we are about to finalize and complete the digitization process of our processes, then we'll be able to fast track those. So at this point, we just appeal to your understanding and then maybe patience as well, because we are trying to streamline these things so that these delays that the sector has been complaining about for an extended period are dealt with once and for all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, the reality is because of the number of applications that have been flooding the system, if you have some idea of the registration process, the registration committee is largely made up of volunteers who would be the peer reviews of the various reports that come in. There's also a moderation process and so forth, and that does weigh down the system and may lead to delays. Yeah.
Yes, now I know that process very well. I am an assessor myself, and yes, that's why I see sometimes the amount of applications I need to review. It's a lot for one person. So if I feel that the lack of assessors is already a problem, never mind the process of registration, whether it's manual digitization, there's just not enough resources available to assess each application within the timeframes. And then same with if you got people now that required to assess each application, where are those people going to come from? Will they be engineers? Will they be people specifically working for ECSA that are not volunteers? And also, will there be a fee applicable for each approval that you require? We don't know what the process is going to look like.
Yeah. No, thank you for your comments. Unfortunately, I'm unable to answer. I'm from outside of ECSA, and one will rely on the ECSA personnel to address it. And I think Ms. Mshali has indicated some of the challenges, and I think that is being addressed within ECSA itself. Yeah, but thank you for your comments.
Okay, Prof, the next hand is from Alice Harvey. Please go ahead.
I think you've partly addressed this, but I just wanted to be clear. Currently, when you register with ECSA, you don't register under a particular discipline. So some of the disciplines overlap. So you might do a civil engineering degree, but then work in mining, and you register then as a professional. Going forward, is that going to remain the case? And then is it just the ECSA Code of Conduct that classifies the type of work that you're doing? So if you end up moving into a different discipline, as long as that's still within your core competence, you wouldn't need to re-register with ECSA.
Yeah, well, you know, I think you have a situation where in any industry there will be different engineers employed on the same site, whether it's civil engineer, electrical engineer, and so forth. But if one is assuming that the work that you do, you have the competence to do, and you're doing civil engineering work within the mining industry. And I'm just asking the question very loosely. I mean, I'm not too sure whether you are also engaging in blasting and so forth, but one is assuming that the work you do is within your professional competence of civil engineering work, but just the environment in which you're working is in the mining sector.
Yeah, I think it's just when I look at the categories, the type of work that we do, for example, mine rehabilitation falls more under the mining category than under civil, but most of my colleagues have civil engineering degrees. And I see someone also posted something similar within the chat about industrial and mechanical. Sometimes the type of work you're doing that is not fully what you studied, but is still within your core competence. So that would still, you wouldn't need to re-register, and it would still fall under the ECSA Code of Conduct that you work within your area of competence.
Competence, yes.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, just to also indicate, I think the documentation also talks about working across disciplines. Within the 11 disciplines that we have identified, we know that within some of these identified disciplines, there may be significant overlap. In particular, if one looks at, for example, mechanical engineering and mechatronic engineering, possibly the same between mechatronic engineering and electrical engineering, and in particular, when we look at the speciality within electrical engineering and the speciality being electronics, one would find that there may be a significant overlap of the type of work that is done. And those people are trained to do that work because when you look at, for example, the mechatronics degree, it's got a fair amount of courses around electronics and electrical engineering. So they have a certain level of competence to deal with electronic engineering aspects within the mechatronic engineering area of practice. So I think that's the reality. But as long as we are working within that competence, that shouldn't be an issue. And these competencies and core areas are defined in the legislation. Yeah.
Okay, Prof, the next hand is from Mohammed Mustafa. You may go ahead.
Mohammed, please go ahead. Mohammed, you can unmute and go ahead.
I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof, for this presentation. My question is about the academic side. You mentioned the academic set of guidelines, which is very good and important guidelines to be shared with all staff. But I would like to focus more on the definition of exit level, because I see that there is an addition of section to say exit level is according to NQF 26/2008. So in other words, we are talking only about the modules taught at the final year of each degree, either BSc or BTech or BTech honors or whatsoever. Am I correct?
Yes. So each of these qualifications are at a particular NQF level. So all courses that are at the exit level, which means if we are looking at a bachelor's degree, which is an NQF level 8, then all courses, well, in fact, it's more than just subjects at the exit level. Remember that when you're talking about assessments, we're talking about assessments of graduate attributes. And the graduate attribute may not be in the final year. The graduate attribute may be assessed in the third year. You could have such a situation. Then it's required that the person that is assessing the exit level graduate attribute has to be a registered person.
All right. So are we talking about the graduate attributes only, or are we talking about graduate attributes and exit level model? Let me just give you a simple example of what we are doing here. We have capstone modules where we assess graduate attributes directly, but we still have other modules at the final year where there is no official assessment of the graduate attributes.
Let me see if there's someone from accreditation that could assist with that. Because I think currently the emphasis is, well, if you assessing an exit level subject and an exit level graduate attribute, then that has to be a professionally registered person. You may have subjects at the exit level that may be of a complementary study type, course. It so happens to be in the final year. But one wouldn't consider to be contributing to the exit level of that particular course.
But are we talking about assessment only, or about also teaching? Because
I think the delivery and assessment, because teaching of any course leads to an assessment. There's an assessment at the end of the teaching. And if it is an exit level,
let me give an example, Prof. The design project, for example, at the final year. So definitely there is an assessment of graduate attributes in the design project. But the supervision of the design project is done by all staff members in the department. So do we need all staff members who are involved in the supervision of the design project to be professional engineers?
So I think the original policy spoke about a caveat that the engineering work can be done under the supervision of a registered person. And here we are hoping that the other members who are not registered as full professionals would be registered at least as candidates in there. So there is a caveat that, within the engineering sector, that there would be the overall supervision of the subject would have to be done by a registered professional.
Right. Sorry to take long, but the last point is assessment. Does it have to be done by only professional engineers, or can be done by a panel which headed by or includes professional engineers?
So I think during this transitional phase where we know that not every institution and not every company is able to comply, that during this transitional phase, one of the mechanisms to address compliance is to have this panel of assessors who has registered professionals within that assessment panel that then take on the full responsibility for saying, like we say, the final sign-off on that particular case. So I think in this transitional period that would be allowed. But given whatever your transitional plan that's submitted to ECSA, ECSA will then monitor that, because when there's an accreditation cycle, it is assumed that within 5 years, there'll be full compliance. It can't be 5 years down the line when we're still using one registered professional to oversee 10 subjects, so to speak. You know, I'm taking it to the extreme. But one is assuming that within a specific period that there will be full compliance. Yes. So in the interim, yes, there could be some interim measures to address the legislation, but that will just be during an interim phase. Going forward, we would expect full compliance. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Prof, I'm realizing from the program that we are overdue for a comfort break. I don't know if you want us to still proceed, because we have quite a few hands up and questions. I don't know how everyone on the call feels about that. Should we proceed with the questions, or should we go for that 15? Memjali? You can go ahead, Niniza.
I'm not going to respond to your question. I would allow the House to respond, but I just wanted to draw your attention to Mduduzi Msibi. I think he wanted to add something on the question that Prof and Mohammed were dealing with.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Msibi, please go ahead.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mamjan. No, I think Prof covered where I wanted to go in terms of the overseeing of that program by a registered person in the interim. So I think I'm covered there. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, comfort break or happy to proceed?
Yeah, I'm good on my side. I don't know about other colleagues that are in the House, whether we prefer maybe a 5-minute comfort break and we can resume.
May we get thumbs up if you're happy to
Yeah,
proceed?
5-minute break, comfort break. Yeah, then let's have a 5-minute comfort break and then we can resume. Gives everyone an opportunity. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Prof, 5 minutes is up.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay. We're happy to proceed.
Yes. Just before we take the next hand, I see that I'm just going through some of the chats. There's been, and some of the points that have been raised thus far, talked to cross-disciplinary practice, where someone's indicating that he's an industrial engineer but working in HIVAC and wanting to know whether there's a need to re-register. And I just want to bring attention to the clause on cross-disciplinary practice. And that was item 2 of the identification of engineering work, where it says a person who's registered as a professional and who performs identified engineering work in a particular discipline identified in items 5 to 16, for which he or she has the competence, education, training, and experience, may perform identified engineering work in a different discipline if he or she has the competence, education, training, and experience to perform such work in that different discipline. So I think the question that was raised about the industrial engineer working in HIVAC, I think you've indicated that you also have some education training in HIVAC and years of experience. So that clause 22 in the identification of engineering work allows you to do that work without registering in an additional category or changing your category, changing your discipline of registration. I hope that kinds of addresses those questions around the overlapping cross-disciplinary work. I think that was James. But I think we're ready for the next question.
Okay, the next hand that we have is Laura Staines.
Laura, please go ahead.
Hi, Laura Stein here. My question may be twofold, so I'll give it to you and then maybe we can see how you respond to that one. So historically, ECSA has allowed for the registration of persons to practice as fire engineers under the PR Tech Eng category of registration. Now, looking at their registrations and their qualifications, most of those did not have the academic qualification as required by the rules of registration. However, they managed to be able to register based on their years of experience. So that's happened, and it's become a requirement because of their registrations. I believe ECSA was pressured into creating the practitioner or the rational design practitioner category and the fire systems practitioner category. That has also further diluted and made it very difficult for persons like myself who has a BT engineering degree and is registered as a professional engineer now to practice as a fire engineer. Now, I do not call myself a fire engineer. I'm merely a mechanical consultant as well. But my education definitely gives me the background for fire engineering. So the practitioner, there's two problems I have, and how is ECSA going to address it, is the practitioner, because many of these practitioners are now practicing as fire engineers and doing rational designs and complex engineering solutions, and it's now hampering my ability to work and find work, especially at municipal level. And is it wise to have a category for fire engineering when PR Eng doesn't have a category for fire engineering, if you understand what I'm saying? So
yes.
Is it wise to keep the practitioner for fire engineering alive, and could we participate in a review of that?
Laura, I hear you loud and clear. The various specified categories that have been created by representation from certain forums. where they felt there was a need for a specified category to, I guess, maybe better control the particular practice. And that's how that's been developed. I think I'm just trying to figure out what it is, because you are saying that is there a need to have this special category? This special category has been created by a demand by a particular sector in the industry that feel that there needs to be this specified category. So I'm not too sure how we address your need, or whether you need to be, whether it opens your opportunities if you then become registered within these specified categories because you have the required competence to be practicing as a fire engineer. But let me get Ms. Mshali to assist and respond. Ms. Mshali.
Thank you, Prof. Maybe mine would be just to provide the clarity. These two fire engineering practitioners are a little bit different. The practitioners versus the regional designers. The practitioners are the ones that are within the specified category of registration within ECSA. And as Prof indicated, it was a special request. But when we were developing that document, and then we also looked at other legislation, for instance, in this instance, we looked at the SAN standard. And then the SAN standard are very clear, or it's very clear that if you want to venture into regional designs, at least your primary registration should be that of a professional engineer as well as that of a professional engineering technologist, because those people have the competence. So the reason why we ended up with two then was just to differentiate so that those at a practitioner level will not venture into the regional designs because their competence is deemed to be you're deemed to satisfy. They follow the exact standards, whereas the regional designers can deviate from the existing standards depending on the complexity of the building itself. So if you are registered as a professional engineer or as a professional engineering technologist, you are welcome. But then also remember, when Prof was presenting, he indicated that when you are registered in a higher category of registration, you are also deemed competent to perform the work that is done by the lower registration category, and the same and the opposite is not practical. So if the municipalities are approving regional designs that have been submitted by the practitioners that are following that are registered as practitioners, that cannot be correct. That cannot be correct. And in fact, I can confirm that we did receive one complaint saying exactly what you are saying, and then we responded. And then we also SAIS also said they were going to even publish that advisory note that we sent on that regard.
Yeah, the problem is that you have created now a misconception in industry that practitioner in rational design is now superior to a pure eng. So I am finding it that my work has, or my career is now being hampered by that. I am not accepted as a competent person by the municipality, by the fire department, nor the insurance companies. And that is basically because to register as a fire practitioner, you only need to possess a certificate for firefighting and years of experience as a firefighter. Well, you might say no, but that is the registered persons that I know and who are practicing as fire engineers at the moment. So the problem with having a separate category like this has been to dilute your PRN validity, in my opinion, and I do have other colleagues that feel the same. So I believe ECSA must revisit this registration again and see if I've personally been asked to moderate and interview category candidates who has not even had firefighting experience but has practiced as a draftsman and has a certificate at ASIP and now wants to become a fire practitioner, rational practitioner, or a practitioner designer. And I believe that is not the intention, but it is happening now.
No, it's noted. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. But as indicated, that was not the intention.
Yeah.
Those are unintended consequences. But then we'd have to relook at it. Thank you.
Yeah. Laura, can I suggest that you make, and you may have already, but to just make a written submission to ECSA, so that can be further dealt with.
Okay, well that's great. If that's going to be considered, that's actually my question. Can we consider it? Yes, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pleasure.
Okay, the next hand, Prof, is from Nagi Kolisa. Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, Kolisa, we can.
Okay. Yes, I think you have made mention of the two departments. I did work for both two departments from the provincial level. But one thing I want to understand from ECSA, in both departments, I experienced the same problem. You are the registered person as a technician, but you're taking instruction from the person who is not registered at all from the engineering council, and you may find that most of the instructions were not engineering related, but you have to comply because you're working for the department. Have ECSA considered that situation, because most of the students that are within those departments are struggling to register because they didn't have even the right instruction that is relevant to the Engineering Council of South Africa. And I want to understand, why is it happening on those particular departments that you have made mention of, especially at the provincial level? Because it's the only problem that make people, I can't say doing the poor job, but on my level of understanding, if you can go and see what people who are working for those departments, what are they doing around the industry, you can see that this is not even engineering related, and these are the government institutions that may comply to the Engineering Council of South Africa. So I have a conclusion on that particular situation, that ECSA have considered the situation that we are working under when we are working for these departments. And how about the student who want to register, the candidate who want to register as a professional, because she get an instruction that is not an engineering related instruction, and once she wants to interpret the instruction with this supervisor, she gets struggling.
Yeah.
So this is my problem.
Yeah. No. We hear you. I think it's a challenge, but I think it's a minefield if we start looking at what has been the practice and what now is going to be the practice. Like I've indicated, that the government has come up with a framework for professionalizing the public sector, and combined with that, we now have the identification of engineering work, where people that are making decisions around engineering would now need to be registered professionals. So hopefully going forward that would be addressed. Mr. Mshali, you want to add to my response?
I think you have responded to what I was saying because I wanted to highlight the importance of professionalization of the public sector, which you've already touched on. Maybe what we can also share is that if the candidates are struggling to get a proper mentorship, they can communicate directly with ECSA because we do have a mentor-mentee connector program where we assist the candidates so that they are supervised and assisted and supported by the registered persons. But then with the professionalization, surely that problem will surely but subside, and that is why for the past 2 years, ending in March, we have targeted specific government departments that are performing engineering work as well as government entities, because that is where the professionalization needs to start, because that is the government legislation. So we are hoping that with people who can see that the professionalization will add value, that they support it. So that is why we are here today, also on our side as the Engineering Council of South Africa, to say those who are not registered, we urge them to do so that they are not locked outside. Thank you.
Yeah, so, sorry, Prof.
Yeah, I think Mdu, you wanted to add to it? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to the colleague, what has been happening was not wrong specifically, because there was no requirement for supervisors to be registered, but mentors were to be registered, of which Umamjali has now covered that going forward, we now want even the supervisors to be registered. So we mustn't take like they were doing something wrong. It was just not covered. And that's the gap that we're trying to cover with the identification of engineering work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. But the other thing is to pleading ECSA or to fast track the backlog that they have, because we are struggling. Yeah. We don't know what to do now.
Yeah,
the cycle is now opening again.
Yeah, so as we've indicated, all these divisions are now required to submit their implementation plan to ECSA, and using that implementation plan, ECSA will then be able to play that monitoring role. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Prof, if I may add again, sorry.
Yes, please
in
go
terms
ahead.
of the backlog, yes, there is a backlog, but this system is new. It was introduced, I think, last year. So late last year, we had an engagement with the ECSA CEO where we look at the ways to try and reduce this backlog, because within the system also there will be teething problems that come in, but hopefully going forward, we will see less and less, because there is a stage of EA interview or experiential appraisal interview that was now becoming sort of a default stage. And we're trying to eliminate that. We're trying to make the people that do assessments to be less, all those things to try and see how we can improve. But again, what you are saying is true. And we expect that this year maybe things are going to change and improve a little bit better in terms of registration. And we do meet regularly to make sure that we look into these problems and the lessons and how we can improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mdu. Thank you, Kolisa. Hopefully we are setting your mind at ease, but it may take a while to address some of the inefficiencies that do exist. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Prof, the next hand is from Nduvu Chirangwane. Please go ahead.
Hello, just want to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Good morning, Prof, and thank you very much for the informative session and the presentation that has been shared. So I'm a civil engineer working in the construction sector, and I think my question is more to do with the compliance part of things and accountability, because I think in terms of identifying work, the framework is clear on what is engineering work. But then my question is more to ask, how are we, or how is the council going to ensure compliance, particularly from where I am on the construction side of things, because at least on the consulting side, you will need that plan or whatever to have a signature on it. However, when coming to the construction side of things, there isn't really much control or oversight, let me say, that the council has, even though construction has been identified as engineering work, and it is engineering work. So I think my curiosity, it's on that part, because just to add as well, there's no real requirement for people doing construction work or even temporary works designs to particularly be registered with the council. There isn't really a requirement of that nature, even though that work should be done by people who are registered. So that's where my question is coming from. And I think also somebody in Nkosinathi asked a question to say, what powers does ECSA have in the industry in comparison with other professional, I guess, councils like the HPC SA? Because that's where my question is to say, because the council can only hold accountable people who are registered with the council. So now, what about those people who are practicing and they are not registered? So for them, they don't even know about this kind of talk that we're having right now, because they're just working wherever they are working. And there's nothing really stopping them from continuing to work, even though this framework would be in place, because there is no real, I don't think the council has got enough power over the engineering work, where currently over the work that you've identified. I think that's where I'm trying to get an understanding, to say, why should we, I mean, if like for somebody like me, I'm in construction, and I can tell you now, there's very few and far in between to come across anybody who is registered with any council, for that matter, in construction, even though it's engineering work. So yes, I think it's more about compliance and how do we hold people accountable.
Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear. I think when you look at the identification of engineering work, where we're now requiring anyone doing engineering work to be registered with the ECSA, I think the other 5 councils within the Council of the Built Environment are also developing their framework for the implementation of identification of work that's related to their professions. And of course, I know you're talking about unregistered people that are doing work, but if they are registered with a particular council, then there will be a code of conduct for that particular council. And if someone's working outside their area of competence, then they should be subjected to a disciplinary investigation by their specific council. The fact that we've now identified work that requires to be done by people that are registered with ECSA, any deviation from that is that person is breaking the law, because this is legislation. And we're hoping that we get to such a point where people doing engineering work that are not registered with any other professional body, that are not trained in engineering, and if they are caught to be doing engineering work, they then are breaking the law, because you have a legislation that has identified engineering work, and it requires you to be trained with the appropriate qualification and have what we've listed as the 11 core competencies associated with engineering. And of course, if you're breaking the law, then you're subjected to the laws of the country and be charged, or whatever the case may be. Yeah. Mr. Mshali, please.
So, sorry, if I could just maybe follow it up.
Yes.
Sorry about that, Prof. Because I think where my question stems from, it's also with what you've just said now in your response. It's only when somebody has been caught.
Yes.
Because that's because most of the times when a failure happens on a construction site, that's only when the council gets involved. We saw, I think it was last year in PE or somewhere on the Eastern Cape,
that's right.
Building collapsed. That's when only the council got involved. That building construction had been there for months at least, But that's why I'm saying it doesn't look like the council has oversight over these activities or control over these activities, in the sense that I can appreciate that the council cannot go to every construction site and make sure that all the drawings are signed off and that the right people are doing the work. But we need to get to a point where people who are not qualified, because that's what this identification of engineering work document is about.
Yes.
It's making sure that they don't even get to that point where they put the public and the environment at risk, not only after the fact. I think that's what is not being addressed in our sector. I think that's why I referred back to the gentleman who spoke about the medical practice. I cannot go and open a surgery today. You don't have to wait for me to kill somebody on a surgery table for you to come back and say, wait, you're not a doctor. I am not allowed. The law does not allow me. Whereas when coming to engineering work, it's more of as long as you don't get caught, you will survive.
Well, I mean, I just need to indicate we've read of cases where people have been impersonating doctors and working in hospitals and even operating surgeries until they get caught. And I think, you know, that's the telling statement of getting caught. And I think, you know, with this legislation is meant to protect our profession. And if there are, and if you know of people that are you know, not complying with this legislation, then report it. You know, that's what it's going to rely on. It's going to rely on people reporting where, well, I wouldn't say incompetent, but people that are do not have the required qualifications and competency, you know, doing engineering work that they shouldn't be doing, then we need to report it so that there can be some consequence to that. Remember that, you know, in the building sector, there are many, you know, you have to fulfill the requirements of the municipality. There are other requirements that need to be fulfilled. And if it's reported to the municipality, but hang on, you know, you've got people here that are making engineering decisions when, you know, they don't have the necessary knowledge and expertise, then, you know, that municipality or that it can then take action against the company that's promoting such activities. The bottom line, or not the bottom line, the ultimately we will need to start holding companies accountable. If a company is employing someone that's not fully, you know, is not registered, but is allowed to do engineering work, then the company will be held accountable. But you know, the way this rolls out, we at the starting point, the way this is going to roll out is, I guess your guess is good as mine on this. But maybe there's someone from the legal sector of ECSA can give us some indication of how do we ensure compliance. Mr. Mshali?
Thank you, Prof. Indeed, we are working on the enforcement mechanisms as we speak, and I would urge and request the attendees to also keep their eye on the website so that they also attend those webinars, because they will be running soon, maybe earliest next month, latest March. There will be a similar webinar that will be zooming into the enforcement mechanisms that are put in place already to make sure that those who are performing the engineering work are the correct people. And if you are not a correct person and performing engineering work, then that goes to what Prof just said, that it constitutes a criminal offense. So we are trying to protect the profession as well as the public as one of our key mandates. Thank you.
Prof, may I add? I'm not from the legal department.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to add to what Mamchali has indicated regarding the enforcement and the enforcement tools that ECSA is currently developing. We are also in the process, colleagues, of looking at having a monitoring and evaluation unit within ECSA that will also assess, the extent to which our policies are being adhered to in industry. So that is something that is maybe still in the pipeline, but we have thought about it. It is important not only to develop policies, but also to assess whether these policies are being adhered to. So yeah, I just wanted to add that, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Maybe we can take the next.
I think Mr. Msibi has his hand up. I don't know if you'd want to go.
Please go ahead.
No, Chair. Thank you. It's an old.
OMDo, you wanted to add to that?
No, Chair. It's an old hand. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next hand is from George Hubert.
I was never given a chance early on. Sorry to interrupt. I mean, I was just given 1 second and I was cut off. Sorry about that, but
apologies.
Give me a chance whenever.
Is that Ishak?
Yeah, mine is quite a serious one.
Okay, let's take George first, and then we'll consider you next.
Thank you very much.
Afternoon, Prof, and ECSA team and other people that's joining it. Maybe before I ask my question, interesting information. That building collapsed in George. I cycled past it the day before and they were busy removing scaffolding, I think from the 2nd or 3rd floor. I don't know if that information was available to the investigation, but or had any influence in the collapse, but I was aware of that. My question is more related to, again, the overlapping and cross-disciplinary work. Although I'm registered as a professional engineer, I've got young engineers that wants to register with typically an electrical background, but they work in an asset management environment, or some will say it's industrial engineering or reliability engineering environment. So my question more is, how do we get these guys, if they didn't do a pure electrical project, registered as electrical engineer? Is it acceptable for them to use the environment where they work to use a project that's more related to asset management, physical asset management in that regard, to hand in that documentation and they can still be registered as electrical engineer? I'm thinking of people, I'm working for the City of Cape Town. I know the same issue exists in Sasol when I was working there. And typically people working in consulting firms like Pragma also sit with that problem, where they're delivering an asset management environment for, say, electrical equipment, or in Sasol's case, you had engineers working across multidisciplinaries. How do we handle that? I don't know if it was covered in the documentation, but I didn't get a clear view of that. If you're already registered, it's easy. You just maintain your registration. But a new engineer in that environment is quite a different approach.
Yeah. So I heard you mention that. Were these youngsters industrial engineering trained people, or are they electrical engineering trained people?
We've got a mixture of them. So some of them are electrical, because we're in the electrical department. So the asset management is focused on electrical. But when I was working at Sasol, it was a mixture of disciplines. And when we started with the whole reliability or asset management approach, there wasn't a proper industrial engineering course at that stage. So it was people that was in their disciplines working in environment. I think it also goes to the maintenance environment, because a lot of engineers wants to be professionally registered, but they land in a management position, a maintenance management position. So they're not purely in design work, but they're looking after equipment from an engineering point of view or from a management point of view, to prolong the lifetime of the equipment. And I feel in all the documentation that I went through, it's still a gray area where you don't get a nice feel. How do you help these guys to get registered as a professional engineer? And I'm sitting with one of my subordinates that currently wants to register, so I need to guide him through it. but I'm not sure what to tell him.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that the application would be based on the type of education background the person has, because that's where the competence or the knowledge of the candidate is. So if it's an electrical engineer, and yes, he's looking after asset management, but with that asset management and maintenance, he's applying electrical engineering principles to ensure that that piece of equipment is performing at a particular level and so forth, and hence he would register, and I'm assuming that the registration committees that are evaluating this would recognize that, well, this is an electrical engineer. He is involved in the maintenance and asset management. And if it's related to electrical engineering, then they would see it as being appropriate experience for that particular discipline. Quite often when we get applications and when the description doesn't suit the discipline, then that particular application is then referred to the appropriate discipline team to evaluate the application. I don't know whether I'm helping, but one takes note of your challenge, and maybe other people in the group could probably respond
and maybe
some ideas.
Some added comment to that. I also believe, as a professional engineer, even though I didn't work in the designing environment, if I ever move into that environment, I won't sign off a document, because that's my professional view till I feel I'm clued up in that environment and had enough exposure. But that's my personal view. There might be other guys, even that they didn't do a designing and they're now in a professional engineer, that might just walk into a company and start signing off stuff without having the exposure or the proper knowledge of design work on the electrical environment, for example. So that's maybe a danger of having a professional engineering title, but it's that ethical kind of issue that you need to keep in mind as well. I don't know if somebody from the ECSA team can give comment or provide more insight.
Yeah. But thank you for your comments, George, and maybe someone will respond. I'm just looking at the hands that we have. We did indicate that we were going to take Ishak next. Ishak?
Yes, sorry, thank you, Prof. I am academically involved with 2 institutions, and we also have a practice. Now, I assist formwork, contractors sometimes working out, the areas and so on. And then in the process, I come across a number of different engineers, structural engineering designs and drawings. I came across some of these designs that were totally inadequate. It was deficient in structural engineering design. It was flawed, and I don't know how to put it. But fortunately, I made contact with some of the engineers, and they took it well. My concern is, I did write to ECSA on numerous occasions. They never responded using the engineering email at ECSA. How does one handle this? What can one do about it? That's the one question. And just the second one is also, I've been involved in moderating final year, BSc theory of structure papers, and I found those for all the years to be totally inadequate, substandard, flawed. I don't know which other words to use, and does ECSA get involved with the institutions and look at the papers, at least structures papers, which is a very important subject in it, the whole of the, the degree. That's all I wanted to just mention. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you. I just want to take you up on your last comment, because I'm in education as well. is that when you are the moderator, I'm assuming that you would reflect in your moderator's report that you think that this is inadequate and not at the required standard, and therefore you are not accepting it as the moderator. Because that's the only time that one would hope for a change in the way things are getting done.
Can I just say something on that one? What
Yes.
would you do if you get a call the morning telling me to come and moderate, you know, and then at that time it would have been the first time I've seen the question papers and the memorandum.
Yeah. So
you know,
I
so I
mean,
don't see it for printing, you know.
Yeah, so just, I mean, you know, if you were to give a negative report and when an accreditation is being done, your negative report will then, you know, the accreditation committee there would then be able to view your comments about it. Unfortunately, I think you probably feel that you feel obliged to just, you know, sign off, but you're actually doing the profession a disservice. And therefore, you should reflect in your report. And let's see how the head of department then handles it. In addition to that, I think there are whistleblower mechanisms within ECSA, because surely if you write to ECSA, ECSA would then investigate. You know, because we've had situations where we've received a particular comment about, you know, a whistleblower's report, and that would be investigated by ECSA. Yeah. You know, that's what I can recommend to you. So there's two things that if you find the paper that's not up to standard, that you reflect as such in your moderator's report. Yeah. And then, of course, there is the whistleblower's mechanism in which ECSA can then further investigate.
Yeah, I think I should take some blame for that because, you know, the person involved is, I know him for so many years.
Yes.
And was a bit concerned, you know, going to the dean would have caused issues or problems for him, you know. So I just left it at that. But yes, 100% check, you know, that.
That's what it is. But I mean, having said what you said, I mean, your friend should take advice from you. If it's an acquaintance, then, you know, you should be open and frank and indicate that, you know, you're not willing to sign this until he makes the following recommendations and changes. But thanks for your comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next hand is from Renee Naidu.
Renee, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, I'm sitting with my colleague Russell Bradbrook, and we've consolidated our questions, so he's just going to go through them for you.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So I know where there was discussions about the whole possibility of how technologists could get essentially registered as a PRN to. I think this subject has come up previously with ECSA, and the ECSA representatives. I'm going back to even the latest in 2023, where we had met with them. That we were told there is no recognition for prior learning of how to go from a technologist to engineer. There is a RPL route to go from technician to technologist, but the understanding is there's nothing. And if we are going to contemplate and open that up, then my worry is we're already in a diluted version. If you look at the Washington Accord and what other, call it, representatives in Washington Accord are requiring, a lot of those countries are requiring master's degrees, 5 years experience. Let's think about like chartered engineer to get into this thing of, let's say, with our professional engineers, where we've got equivalent, let's say, of an honors degree and 3 years experience. So diluting that, my mind would open us up to the possibility even get thrown out of the Washington Accord. So I would not advocate in that route. And I think the same thing is, if we go back 20 odd years ago, I think pre-2000, there used to be the grandfather clause. Again, that grandfather clause is not in our ECSA regulations, and I wouldn't advocate we start it again, which used to be you've got 25 years experience in a particular field. Now you can call yourself or get registered as the PRH. Yes. The other thing that we did speak about, and I think is covered in the IDoEW, the whole fact that, let's say, a professional engineer is deemed to be able to operate as a professional technologist, and similarly being able to operate as a professional technician related to that, deemed by their qualification, which essentially, and their experience, which is covering under like section 17. But if you look at section 16 about the professional certificated engineer, I see a big gap there, because already, if you look at and we talk about qualifications experience, the minimum qualifications we know to get government tickets is an N6. So not saying that the person's got it, maybe they've got a T diploma or BTech or a degree, but the minimum is the N6, which therefore, if you look at 17 in terms of the registrations, that person would have only be able to become a professional technician. Now, the 16 covers them to say they're allowed to do broadly defined work. And nobody, if you look at it, be a professional engineer, professional technologist, and you're a professional technician, is able to do that professional certificated work unless they've got an electrical engineering certificate, competency, or mechanical in related to Mines and Works Act and factories. So for this field in factories and mines, who is doing the complex work then? Because you've got a big gap. Nobody, and I'm not advocating that the 16 then says it's complex, because again, next moment we're going to have N6s that are allowed to do complex work. So that's another concern with the IDoEW. The third one is that we know that the 2021 IDoEW essentially had a 3-year period to be actioned, and in essence, I mean, if we look at it, we're sitting in January 2025. But in terms of the fact it's gazetted, it's meant to be in law. I know there is nobody's enforcing it from an ECSA perspective, but it's in until this new IDoEW comes in, which I see where we're advocating another 3-year, if you want to call it, grace period to get registered. What my concern is, ECSA came out with the circular about the enforcement of identification of work and compliance plans. They were talking about the confusion around, we're not going to enforce the IDoEW effective April 1, 2025. That's not gazetted. So legally, this has no bearing. But as you spoke about earlier, about the compliance plans that need to be in by March 31, 2025, which is in the circular, it doesn't reflect anywhere in the IDoEW. So if it's not going to be in the IDoEW, that's going to be gazetted, once again, people are not going to follow this because it's not law. So that needs to be incorporated into this IDoEW. And then the last one is the whole, let's call it the whole issue around, let's say, professional engineers operating as project managers, and what's going on with the South African Council. I see in terms of our Appendix C, under item 2, we talk about the work referred to in the table below is the work contemplated in notice number 43495 of 2020, issued by the Council of Building Environment. That notice is all about the different definitions of PR-Eng, PR-Tech-Eng, PR-Cert-Eng, PR-Techni-Eng. It's got nothing to do with project management. And so I actually don't know, and it's a very brief version of these versus what's in the IDoEW. So that's the most confusing reference I've ever seen. All right, so that's my comments.
Okay, great. No, thank you. Thank you for those various comments that you made. We have made note of it. I think I could possibly just respond to some of the issues you've raised, especially around your concerns around the grandfather clause and RPL to a different level, and your concern related to the impact it would have on the mobility forums. Just to indicate that there is what's referred to as the, I think, International Engineer Register, and candidates that come via alternate routes don't go onto that register. So you know, I think the same happens even with the UK, that has the chartered engineer. But if you achieved the chartered engineer via the alternate route, I don't think you can get onto the international register as an international engineer. So I think that, you know, it does safeguard that. The reality is, of course, there needs to be pathways for progression. And within ECSA, those pathways for progression is recognized, that people through time would have developed a certain amount of expertise and could be considered for category adjustment. But of course, that's evaluated by a team to see whether the person applying meets those requirements. Your issues that were raised around the certificated engineer, I think, Ms. Mshali, you will confirm that there is a special task team that's looking at the certificated engineer to bring about more coherence around whatever goes into the identification of engineering work. So there is a task team that's currently looking at the certificated engineer, and all the issues that you've raised are, you know, really issues that would be debated within that task team. And one is hoping that there would be a written submission from you. I know we've taken an oral submission, but a written submission to ECSA on your various concerns would certainly help the task team when it goes through the various concerns that have been raised. We weren't able to even address some of the issues that have been raised in the chat, but the task team would look at all the comments and all the queries that have been made and then come up with a response. And I'm assuming that the response, Q&A sort of response, would then be circulated to all the attendees. But colleagues, if you are currently, many of the questions raised with personal challenges, but if you are having challenges, as have been highlighted by the last speaker, around the formulation of the identification of engineering work and the information or the lack of information or the conflicting information that may appear, please forward us a written submission so that we can take it into consideration. We're now at 12:30. I'm not too sure. Do we want to take one or two more hands before we close the session?
Yes, please, Prof.
Yes.
So 2 hands and we're going to close. The next hand that we have is Vissel Krene's hand.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you very much. I've got 2 questions. I'll be as quick as possible. In paragraph 18.5 of the identification of work, it says a person who is registered as a candidate referred to in section above, the Engineering Profession Act may not apply for special consent and may only perform identified work under the direct control and direct supervision of a person registered. My question is, what is the definition of direct? Is that somebody needs to sit next to them continuously looking over their shoulder, or would design reviews and weekly follow-up meetings be adequate to be classified as direct supervision?
I think the latter is more realistic, where all the work that you're doing is being verified, and you are being mentored on the project.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, it's clear that this Identification of Work Act applies to people working under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but does it comply or apply to people working under the Mine Health and Safety Act?
Mr. Mshali, or maybe someone who's familiar with that sector, the mining sector. I know we've had a fair amount of engagements with the mining sector. And I think the certificated engineer also covers that. Mr. Mshali?
Thank you, Prof. In fact, the Mine Health and Safety Council is the main structure that is responsible for safety in the mining sector, but they do recognize all the professional bodies' requirements. For instance, if you are a doctor within the Mine Health and Safety, you needed to be registered as a professional with the HPCSA. So are the engineering professionals. So we do have a certain amount of influence, because people who have been deemed to be competent and to be registered as professionals by these councils, then the Mine Health and Safety Council considers them the same. Thank you. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thanks.
Yeah. The next question, if there's any. I can't see. Just let me have a look. Who's the next?
It's Louise Ferry, Prof.
Okay, Louise or Lewis.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Louis Fourie. Thank you, Prof. Thank you for the opportunity. I've got two questions. The first one is, I've been in engineering for approximately 30 years. I've got qualifications in various disciplines. Civil engineering, I've got a national diploma, and then I did a B engineering degree in agricultural engineering. Now, this is where the dilemma lies. I'm considering this Section 18 transitional authorization clause within your notice, which is, I must say, well written. I just want to find out if I interpret this correctly, in the sense that I am running a practice, consulting engineering practice. I've got engineers working for me. I'm the managing director of the company, and so I've got quite a team of professionals working under me as well. But the issue here is I just need to check my own compliance to the Act itself. I've been working, as I say, about 30 years in the industry. Because I've qualified in basically three areas, it's civil, agricultural engineering, and industrial engineering. I've been working mainly in the civil engineering field just because of where my income derives from. Mainly in wastewater treatment works and minor buildings, not skyscrapers, for example. The thing is, I've been working under the Code of Conduct, Code of Ethics, interpretation of what work I am allowed to perform, and the Code of Conduct is clear that if I'm qualified and I've got the experience, I may do certain work, but I want to check myself in terms of which work am I allowed to do. For example, a water retaining structure for like a large reservoir. We do the structural engineering for that, but I've got my degree in agricultural engineering, where we did water retaining structures as part of our training, but I've got my civil engineering diploma, and this is quite a grey area, because this is a municipal infrastructure. This is not agricultural project. We also did agricultural structures, like, for example, pack houses, etc. We needed to design structural steel components, floors, etc. But applying that to, let's say, municipal projects or other environments, am I now in breach of the code? If I operate across disciplines, it's very grey, very difficult. This is my concern. I must say this section is well written, in that it gives us a proper process on how to apply, basically making use of my experience as wherever I've been. I mean, I've got the combination of work that I have done in the past as well. Yeah, so if I can quickly deal with that, and then I've got a second question as well, Prof, just in terms of clarification.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna ask to see if someone from registration will be able to assist me. And more so someone with a structural engineering background. Civil engineering is not my discipline, so I don't want to be saying the wrong things. But just in terms of the cross-disciplinary practice, you know, when I look at the final line that says it may perform identified engineering work in a different discipline if he or she has the competence, the education, training, and experience to perform such work in that different discipline. So you did indicate that as part of your agricultural degree, you did a fair amount of, you know, small water storage facility design and so forth. And your question is, well, you're going just beyond that, and whether your background in civil engineering will then say, well, you do have that type of expertise, but are you going beyond what you were trained for as, you know, when you did the national diploma, it was limited to, as we define it now, as well-defined problems. I'm not too sure. Let me see if someone else would be able to assist. I think in terms of Section 22, you know, your multiple degrees does allow you to perform work across disciplines. But your question was specific around structural engineering, and I know that civil engineers are quite particular on the speciality within that particular discipline. But maybe go on to your next question, and then hopefully someone would be able to give us some direction with your first question. Yeah. Because I do realize that there are many people from SAICI in the house, so maybe they'll be able to make a comment. You know, the Civil Engineering Institute. Yeah.
Yes, just for interest sake, I am a member of SAICI for 30 years already. So it's just one has to don't fall short of what the legislation allow me to do, and that I definitely don't want to. I don't want to err in that direction. The second question is a little bit different. It's about the municipality's compliance in terms of the appointment of skilled staff, and I think there are many people in the house that's got that burning issue, where heads of departments are appointed without the necessary skills, qualification, and experience and registration. Now, I don't know what ICSA is going to do about it, but we get more and more people appointed in critical key positions within municipalities who do not comply to SALGAS requirements, for example. And from a public protection point of view, in terms of service delivery, we find it that services are increasingly collapsing because
Yes.
these people just plainly don't have the management and the technical skills to manage this multi-billion rand infrastructure that they are responsible to manage. It may be a political appointment or a transformation appointment in terms of female appointment, etc., and those goals. But at the end, the water needs to be delivered. Sewage in the town or the city where I live in, we've got sewage spills that close the beaches every December. So for example, our tourism industry is wiped out in this city. Now, there's a major concern for us, but it's a failure on the side of the municipality, but it may even be a failure on the side of ECSA. And we need to so that is something else.
Yeah, no, certainly. I'm just going to ask Mbolelo to please give some comment, and in particular, the relationship between ECSA and MISA, especially addressing some of the challenges we have at the municipality. Is Mbolelo still in the house?
Yes, Prof, I still am here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Please.
Okay.
If you could, please. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks, Prof. I think, as you rightfully mentioned, as part of the advocacy work that we've been doing over the past couple of years, we are in partnership with MESA, MISA, as well as SALGA, insofar as, identifying the type of work that ought to be performed by persons who are professionally registered with ECSA. So we do inform them, what is some of the work that has been identified to be engineering work, what are some of the critical positions within the municipalities that they need to ensure that they've got people who are professionally registered. We are hoping that as time goes on, the message is going to sink, and we are going to see more and more municipalities appointing, suitably qualified persons in those positions. We believe it will not be a once-off, event. It will take some time, as people get used to doing things in a particular way. And now that we are raising awareness about these policies, some of them are starting to make some changes. Thanks. Yeah. I'm not sure if it addresses the question, Prof.
Yeah, no, because the question was asked, well, what is ECSA doing about it? But just to indicate that there has been a fair amount of interactions, and in particular with the municipalities. One can't just change what has happened in the past, but certainly going forward, the various issues. The intent is to address many of the inefficiencies and non-compliance within that particular sector. But like you said, some of these things have political connotations to it. Some of these things have a long history that's attached to it that cannot be changed overnight. But hopefully, we do see.
Professor, in this particular case, this is a very recent appointment. And from the business chamber's point of view, we have been in discussion with the municipality to at least ask them to appoint competent people in those positions, and yet they didn't entertain our requests. Now the issue is ECSA has to intervene.
Yeah, I think
somehow, I don't know how, but somehow.
Yeah. So possible the route would be to write to ECSA. There needs to be a written submission, raising your concerns and how there isn't compliance. If their requirement to hold a particular position requires an engineer, and they're appointing people that are not engineers in a particular as an engineering manager, for example, then they're not complying with the guidelines for municipalities, and maybe you should make a written submission. Then ECSA could pursue that with SALGA and MISA and so forth. But maybe I'll just give Ms. Mshali an opportunity to just comment as well. Ms. Mshali?
Yeah, thank you for that comment. And I must say that when it comes to appointment of personnel, our scope is very limited. But we are working with these structures so that the municipality space is professionalized. And in addition to that, SALGA, together with COGTA, I'm not sure who initiated it, but there are regulations that sort of guide the HR processes within the municipalities. I do recall that we once received information where they wanted advice from ECSA with regards to one municipality trying to see how can they try and streamline the municipal recruitment processes so that they are in line with the current framework that they need to follow that specifies how the municipality needs to be structured and how many positions need to be technical and how should they, how are the support structures also need to be appointed and so on and so on. So I guess it is mainly the commitment from the municipality itself, because with those regulations in place, they should be complying with the requirements. There shouldn't be these issues. But then I want to believe that SALGA is working on that, because the meeting we had, we were with SALGA. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I think that there is a comment there by Alison Lawson relating a specific staff, government staff regulations. And if there's non-compliance with that, then one could challenge a particular appointment. Are we done? Are we still taking questions, colleagues? I'm mindful of the time. Some of us may have other engagements planned.
I think we should stop here, Prof. And anyone who still wants to submit their comments, who we didn't get the chance to hear them out, can submit it via email. I did share it on chat with everyone. Thank you so much, Prof.
Yeah, and just to indicate that there were a fair amount of comments in the chat. So we would then give a Q&A response to the various issues that have been raised. And in that Q&A response, we would then circulate to all the attendees.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Yeah.
Ms. Mjali, could you take us through the way forward?
Thank you so much, Kosi. I guess I will just add to what Prof has said, because he has already indicated in terms of how we're going to deal with the questions, and also to accommodate those who did not get the opportunity to air their views here, that they can write to the email that is provided on the chat, and then we'll be able to respond. But after this, we are going to look at all the submissions and the comments that we have received, and then we sit with the National Task Team that advises on the identification of engineering work, and we share information and finalize this document, hopefully, and be able to have it approved before the end of this year. And then also just a reminder on my side to say we are also working on the enforcement framework. Please do watch out so that when that webinar is publicized, then you are the first ones to participate, so that you know how we plan to move forward. I know that Mbulelo has already indicated on the monitoring and evaluation unit that will also assist in making sure that we do follow up on what has been promised on those plans or compliance plans, and then also the enforcement thereafter. So thank you very much for participating in this webinar. It was quite insightful, and then also it assisted us to see some of the gray areas that we need to look into. And we are hoping that with all the comments and the value that you've added, we will produce a really decent document that sort of accommodates yourselves as our professionals that we really want to improve their professional standing. So thank you so much. And thank you again, Prof.
It's always my pleasure. Yeah.
Okay, with that, colleagues, I just want to say thank you all for joining us today. Your presence and engagement are always deeply appreciated by us. I would like to extend our gratitude to everyone who has already reviewed the document and submitted your comments. Like it's been mentioned, those comments are valuable inputs in shaping ongoing discussions for us. And as we conclude, we would like to encourage you guys to continue contributing by submitting any additional comments that you might have via email to us at rpsdservices@ecsa.co.za. On behalf of ECSA, we thank you all for your participation and look forward to your continued involvement. Have a great day and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.